everyone. Yeah, we'll just wait for another minute, and then we can start our exciting event this afternoon. Right. I see colleagues are still joining us, but I think we can start already just to manage our time. I know that our topic for today is very exciting for everyone, so we wanted to give time for interactions at the end of the presentations. So good afternoon, everyone. A very good afternoon from Manila, and good morning to some of our colleagues, and good evening to our colleagues, especially in the Pacific. Thank you for joining us at this time. We welcome you to the Asia Pacific relaunch of the CVA Climate and Environment Community of Practice, which is currently led by the COP network. So for today's relaunch of the cash for the community of practice, it will be followed by a webinar on mitigation and the impacts of CVA on the climate and environment. This is the first of the series of webinar this year, and I hope that everyone will follow all throughout the events that we have prepared throughout the year. So for this webinar, or the series of webinar will be showcasing the potential of cash and voucher assistance in addressing climate change and environmental degradation. My name, by the way, is Michael Vilaro. I'm the COP's regional representative for Asia Pacific, and together with me is Celine Siniski-Villard, one of our technical advisors in COP. Next slide, please. So before we start, let's have a quick reminder on housekeeping. I know everyone is super familiar already with this, but a quick reminder, today's event will last for about 90 minutes and it will be recorded. So, and please mute your microphone and raise maybe your hands if you wanted to speak. Kindly use the chat to introduce yourself. It will be good to know where you're coming from, which organizations you are working with. And we would love to hear from you. So please use the Q&A box. And later we will give time definitely for question and answers at the end of the presentations. Next slide, please. So quickly going to the slide, the agenda. As mentioned, we will have an introduction to the launch of the community of practice. We'll have a few slides, a presentation on the highlights on the State of World Cash Report, especially on the climate chapter. We will also have a presentation from the Humanitarian Advisory Group on greening the humanitarian system, and presentation from the Joint Environment Unit of UNEP and OCHA on integrating environmental considerations in humanitarian response. And after that, we'll be followed by the presentation by Action Against Hunger France on their research on minimum expenditure basket and the calculations they have made on carbon footprints. And then we'll have a panelist reactions on the presentations, and definitely a question answer towards the end. So moving on, as mentioned, the first part of this event is the relaunch of the communities of practice. So I'll give the floor to Celine.
Sorry. Thank you, Michael, for hosting us today. It's good to be here. Next slide, please. So this meeting really marks the relaunch of the community of practice around all the questions around cash and environmental after hiatus throughout 2023. This team currently led by my colleagues Ruth and myself. So if you want to contact us, I put our contact in the chat. It's part of one of the core themes of CALP at the moment, and we have the first dedicated chapter in the State of the World Cash on climate. So with this launch, we have the opportunity to redefine the purpose of the COP, objective way of working, so we can respond best at what we are now. We are obviously internally inside CAP some idea of this thing based on our work to date, but the community of practice, it's you, so it's important that you determine the priority activity as a collective effort. To that end, we love to hear from you what are the priority you and your organization have related to CVA, climate and environment, as well as any relevant initiative you are working on or you are planning for this year. Equally, it will be really useful to get your ideas and objectives for the COP. For example, which topic and type of activity you think we could work on and prioritize. So to that, we will have this webinar style once again, which is a definitely useful format, and quite a lot of persons come back to us during last year to try to relaunch them. But maybe it's not enough, or we need also to do collective work to deliver specific output or guidance or research to deeper dive on this topic. It may be that setting smaller task team or working group on particular topic and to develop projects that may be wanted. So we invite you to take a little time after the webinar to complete a survey that I put the link in the chat again, and that you share it within your network, etc. Because for now we have very limited number of responses, so it's difficult to have a clear perspective of what are the collective priority. And of course, if we want to discuss anything, we are more than open. So please join us, send us email if you want to be part of the mailing list or anything, please let us know and contact us. Next slide, please. So I will give you a very short and sneak peek about the climate chapter that we have in the CAP report of the State of the World Cash that we published end of November last year. So if you want to read more about that, that's the link to the State of the World Cash. Please, next slide. So the report, oh, sorry. So first of all, sorry, with that report, we have this amazing panel and presenter speaker for today. So we have Jessie McCommon that come from the Humanitarian Advisory Group to do a presentation about a framework in the Asia Pacific, but also to present the survey results that AG is doing for the entire humanitarian community on barriers that we have to green humanitarian assistance. We also have the pleasure to have Tina Al-Houri with us today from UNEP, trying to present the tool that you have at your disposal that you can use to integrate more all climate and environmental consideration in your proposition. Then we have Camille Evans that will come from Action Against Hunger, France, to present the last research survey that they are done on the minimum expenditure basket carbon footprint calculation that they suggest. And as a discussant, we have the pleasure to have Clara Citwan with us from ICRC to try to open the discussion and give also a perception about all the discussions that we have today. So thanks for all the panelists. And now I will speak a bit about the State of the World Cash climate chapter. So next slide, please. So as I was telling you, it's the very first time that we have a dedicated chapter on that. So what we found in the state at the moment, if we have this increasingly discourse and practice of humanitarian organization for the past decade on the link with environmental consideration. It found, for example, that the push for better integration of climate issue is reflected with donor and implementing agency strategy throughout emphasis and focus vary. The importance of climate change and the environment are not contested, but there are more questions than answers regarding what the effective roles of CVA might be. Specific position or commitment on humanitarian CVA relating to climate change and environment are limited up to now. There are mixed perspectives on relationship between CVA and environmental issue. Most organizations are in the relatively early stage of configuring linkage between CVA and climate. While some so challenging in identifying meaningful intersection for CVA and climate, others were very positive about opportunities that they are. So the diagram that you have here is part of the chapter and is broadly below the topic on which the role of CVA and climate environment is considered in policy and practice, outlining three questions. So climate and environment are definitely a driver of crisis, which present a new paradigm for humanitarian response. We also see some role of CVA addressing needs arising for climate-induced crisis, but also trying to green humanitarian response to limit the contribution to the global warming. And of course, all the question around funding and the potential disaster risk and climate regarding humanitarian response. Next slide, please. We also try to see what are the framework to enable better understanding of existing and potential use of CVA in relation to climate and environment throughout the life cycle. So the section of the framework are reflecting in that diagram, which is based on the component of the disaster risk reduction and humanitarian response cycle. A key aim is developing the chapter was an opportunity to do a bit of baseline analysis of where we are now on this topic. And I will deep dive on the greening part of this report, but clearly it isn't totally comprehensive and holistic. Also, there is a lot to learn about how and where CVA can be used most effectively. It's already possible to identify multiple potential or existing intersections between CVA, the environment, and climate change. So these are explored in the chapter, and we will look next at the main finding on mitigation. So next slide, please. First, what is mitigation of climate change understood? It's a prevention or reduction of greenhouse gas emission, either by reducing greenhouse gas sourcing or enhancing carbon sink that can remove and store this gases. That's a global thing that we have. However, maximizing the environmental sustainability of humanitarian programming and reducing the associated environmental footprint encompass both greenhouse gas emission and environmental degradation. So for humanitarian organization, in line with the principle of the do no harm, they means working to avoid, minimize, and manage damage, the cost to the environment of the climate, while maintaining the ability to provide timely and principal humanitarian assistance. So we are discussing the mitigation of greening for today is first thing first, avoid, try not to do it, obviously not to jeopardize the humanitarian mandate, but maybe think about in terms of activities that can be avoided, then reduce, so challenge yourself to monitor, calculate the impact of the activity and find way of reducing without changing the humanitarian impact that you have. So manage the damage that you will do, but also reuse, recycle, etc. is part of the reduction according to it. And if these two options for greening are not there, there's sometimes some stakeholder also add another step that we will not encompass at all there or in our report is the last one. So if there are no other way doing it, it's the compensate option. Next slide, please. So general perception, so it's a state of how the person perceives it. So general perception is CVA is widely considered to be greener than in-kind assistance. It's just a perception because it's potential to reduce the environmental footprint of humanitarian intervention. It's because there are less logistic loads we have the potential to boost local production and economy, and also persons choose CVA that avoid transporting and distributing the unnecessary goods that they don't align with recipient needs or willingness to have, and maybe be traded off or disposed of. But calculating and evaluating the environmental footprint of different modalities is complex and it's non-standardized. As a result, it has been difficult to prove assumptions about the environmental footprint of CVA in practice. Attribution is further complicated for cash assistance, where spending choice belongs to the recipient and may be involved by multiple issues which are beyond the influence of implementing organization. Moreover, different stakeholders do not consider the same scope, as we can see on the graph, while some only consider it as a direct emission and part of their indirect emission toward energy, part of the scope too. Others will go downstream and consider all the induce, the way that the final recipient will use what they receive from the program. Skepticism regarding the feasibility of a standardized shared methodology to assess the environmental impact of CVA, despite all the efforts made, are still very important due to that. Next slide, please. So, moreover, cash is a very peculiar option. Most recent humanitarian studies on environmental impact are based on the life cycle approach. So we consider all stages of the product or services, from acquisition of raw material throughout to the final disposal. Modality choice have implication for opportunity available to humanitarian actors to directly manage environmental impact at different stages of a program life, of a product life cycle. The issue with cash is the fungibility of it. The transfer of agency to the people receiving it means more limited scope for direct action to reduce environmental impact. However, studies are often show that the highest emission for most of the products are related to the production stage, with organizational scope to directly influence these processes are generally relatively limited for other assistance, such as in kind. So several key informants emphasize the need to avoid restricted people spending based on the perceived tension between the flexibility of cash and the potential environmental impact. We also have a lot of discussion in the cash world around the environmental impact of the digital payment that are not generally well understood or considered in program design, and often perceived, once again, as a major source of greenhouse gas emission, as it covers several aspects, including energy consumption for storing and transferring data and powering device, and the impact of producing and disposing of digital hour, but no study are yet published on the real impact. So if we take the whole report, we have emerging option to integrate the mitigation of environmental impact into CVA, with some of them that we discuss further today, thanks to the analysing panelists. So we ensure environmental factors are incorporated into programming tools, including assessments and analysis, and it will be presented. We also integrate an environmental lens as a core element for CVA, which can include use of environmental lens market assessments, use of environmental lens in the MEB composition, consider the potential environmental impact relating to digital payments, and include also environmental criteria in the selection of private sector partners. So work with local market and trade union and market environmental policymakers to facilitate environmental preferred product is also part of the global reduction on the market, and consider awareness raising activity on environmental conscious practice and purchasing as a complement to cash assistance is also something that we have discussed, not today, but in general. Thank you so much for your attention. So next slide, please. And Michael, I leave you the floor again.
No, thank you very much, Celine, for that overview, especially on highlights of States of Work Cash Report. So as mentioned by Celine, so the climate chapter of the States of Work Cash Report is the very first time, and it offers more questions really than solutions. So you just mentioned that I think this cumulative practice is ever more needed, no, for us to unpack all those questions and debates together. So join us in more events in the future. But maybe to help us in unpacking those questions on greening the humanitarian response, we will hear from Humanitarian Advisory Group from Jesse. So just a quick background from Jesse. Jesse is a leader with the Humanitarian Advisory Group, a social enterprise based in Melbourne, Australia, that provides research, training, and technical advice to humanitarian actors in Asia Pacific, but also at the global level. So she leads the Greening the System research, which seeks to support the sector for measurably reduce the negative impacts of humanitarian action on climate and the environment. So without much further ado, I'll give the floor to Jesse.
Thanks so much, Michael. So hello, everyone. My name is Jessie McCummon. I work for Humanitarian Advisory Group, as Michael just mentioned, and here to talk to you about our Greening the System research today. Next slide, please. So this research is part of our Humanitarian Horizons research program. And so this research focuses predominantly in the Indo-Pacific region, but also has a global reach as well. It's supported by the Australian government, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and it has 3 separate research streams, one of those streams being greening the system. So next slide, please. So as Michael mentioned, this stream is around reducing the negative impacts of humanitarian action on the climate and environment. And we kicked off this research by first developing a vision. So we tried to get a better understanding of what green humanitarian action really looks like, what it could look like, what the priorities are for the sector. We then went through some methodology processes and a lot of consultation to figure out how we can take that vision to action. And what came out really strongly from there is a need for really practical, accessible, and contextualized tools. So that's what led us to the development of this framework for greening humanitarian action in the Pacific. And so this is an operational framework that was contextualized specifically to the Pacific region by Pacific actors. And I'm going to chat you through a little bit more about what that framework entails today. And then alongside the development of the framework, we also did a behavioral study. So looking at what are the key behavioral barriers and opportunities to push the sector towards greener action. And that study hasn't been published yet, but will be shared with you as soon as it is launched in the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to chat through some of those findings as well today. Next slide, please. So what is the framework for greening humanitarian action in the Pacific? So as I mentioned, it's an operational framework, and it was designed to be really accessible and not too technical and convoluted. It was designed to provide a really practical approach for local, national, international actors and efforts to green their operations. So it's framed at quite a high level in the intention that it can be sort of adapted and contextualized to sort different organizational needs. It has a really big focus on the importance of local leadership in greening operations and centering community perspectives and local knowledge as we try to green humanitarian response. So the framework is broken down into 5 key areas, and these align really closely with the vision that was first developed. And so the first is around protecting habitats and their inhabitants. So this is around protecting biodiversity and environmental concerns. Then managing water use, so looking at conserving and protecting water sources, reducing and better managing waste, so looking at packaging of supplies and plastic, using more long life relief items, reducing emissions through program setup, transport, procurement, all sorts of operations, and then also pushing the sector towards more renewable energy options. So the way the framework's set up is there's each of these key areas has a desired outcome at the top. And so this is sort of an aspirational goal that links really closely with the vision. And then that's broken down into several activity areas and then specific actions under each of those. And it's also accompanied by a couple of different tools. So we've got some guidance on environmental screening, and also a baselining tool to measure progress and track progress as you move through the greening processes. Next slide, please. So I obviously don't have time to get into everything that's in the framework, but wanted to pull out a couple examples of good practice and some examples of the activity areas and different actions, just to give you a better idea of what's in the framework and what it looks like in practice. So the first area that I pulled out is around protecting habitats and their inhabitants. So the desired outcome here is that humanitarian action has a net positive impact on habitats and biodiversity. So, and one of the activity areas that I pulled out here is around agricultural activities. So there's a couple different activity areas under here, some around sustainable infrastructure, some on nature-based solutions, some on local and community knowledge and building on that. But I pulled this one out specifically to highlight a really good example that we have of this in Tonga. So one of the actions on here, the number 5 at the bottom there, is around increasing the productivity, sustainability, and resilience of community agriculture and food systems to reduce the impacts of disaster. And so we have a really great example of this from the Civil Society Forum of Tonga, who launched something called the Cash for Crops initiative after the tsunami in 2022. And so essentially this program provided cash to farmers to be able to harvest their crops that were damaged by the tsunami. And that food that likely wasn't going to be able to be sold was then transported and provided to all of the communities who were evacuated in the outer islands. So it's a really great way to, one, inject cash into the system, but also to sort of close the gap and also provide food for communities that really needed it. This program also supported farmers to engage with climate smart agricultural practices, and also helped to replant trees and crops to reverse soil erosion and land degradation. So these are all things that are part of the activities in this framework. So this is a really great example of how it can be put into practice, and also a great example of how environmental concerns can be integrated into cash programming. Next slide, please. So another example I pulled out is around waste. So the desired outcome here is that humanitarian action prioritizes reduction and appropriate management of waste. And the activity area I pulled out is around plastic and packaging. And so at the top, you see that the first action is around promoting CVA to reduce supplies that are shipped in. And I also wanted to draw attention to number 3 here, which is impose environmental policies that reduce packaging as early in the supply chain as possible, for example, through initial purchase agreements or contracting. And we have a really great example of that from the humanitarian logistics capability, which is an arm of the Australian government that manages logistics for emergency response. And so we worked really closely with them in developing a greening strategy for the organization and reducing their emissions. They also identified waste as a really critical area that they wanted to focus on. So they did introduce guidelines to suppliers around suitable packaging and sustainable packaging for relief supplies. And then this figure below here just shows an example of the amount of waste that they have been able to reduce so far from different relief supplies that have been pre-positioned in the Pacific. So it's more than 25 kilos of waste. So it's a great example of how implementing some of these activities early on in the procurement process can really make a big impact. Next slide, please. So that's just a couple examples. There's obviously a lot more in the framework, but just to give you a quick little preview of it. And then moving on to this here is around the behavioral study that we did. So it's called Pathways Towards a Green Humanitarian Response. And this study draws on a lot of interviews with humanitarian and climate experts across the globe. Also, a big survey that went out. And we use a lot of behavioral science insights in this research. So the way data was analyzed and recommendations were presented is around something called the COM-B model. And so what that is it's a behavioral science model that identifies 3 core domains of change for behavior change. And so those are capability, which is around knowledge, skills, and abilities. So do people know how to do the change that you're asking them to do? Opportunity is around sort of external factors and the enabling environment. So do people have the tools and resources that they need to do the behavior change that you're asking them to do? And then motivation is obviously if people actually want to make the change. So this was really critical to the way that we structured this research and presented key findings. So next slide, please. So we identified quite a few barriers, and a lot of these are well known, but they've been grouped into this capability, opportunity, and motivation model here so that we can better understand how to actually move past them. So some of the big ones that came up are around limited knowledge and awareness of the importance of a green system, lack of skills and expertise of climate in humanitarian organizations, the lack of contextualized tools, which we tried to speak to with the framework. And then we also have obviously the difficulty, the time, the cost, the perceived trade-off between saving lives and saving the environment that's really common in the humanitarian sector, limited opportunities for local actors, limited funding, lack of strategic engagement, and a lack of defaults, which is around sort of those automatic, easy, entrenched behaviors and the way the system typically operates that don't support greening. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just highlight some of the key survey findings from the survey that we did. So the first one we have up here is, to what extent is a lack of motivation a barrier to greening the humanitarian system? And here we have a little over 70% of people claiming that that was very much a barrier, a strong barrier, or somewhat of a barrier. And then below that, we have, to what extent is a lack of greening expertise and capability in many organizations a barrier to greening humanitarian aid? And here we have nearly 90% of respondents saying that that is very much a barrier, a strong barrier, or somewhat of a barrier. Next slide, please. And so then these questions were framed slightly differently. This is around agreeing or disagreeing. And the first one here is, donor funding is adequate and flexible enough to enable agencies to green operations. And here we have, again, nearly 70% either strongly disagreeing or somewhat disagreeing with that statement. And below that, we have, greening humanitarian aid is achievable without compromising the effectiveness of life-saving objectives. And I think this one's really interesting because here we again have almost 70% of people saying that they either strongly agree or somewhat agree. So it really shows that some of that mindset is starting to shift, that it's not necessarily an either or, but that we can do both. So I think that was a really interesting finding. Next slide, please. So here then we have the recommendations, and these were grouped into 3 different critical actor groups. And so those are champions for change, which is just sort of your everyday advocates, humanitarian leaders and managers, which are your decision makers, and then humanitarian donors, obviously, that need to sort of resource and create accountability for these shifts. And these are broken down again into that COM-B model. And when we're looking at advocates, their recommendations for them are around communicating really effectively, supporting leaders to drive change, holding leaders accountable, empowering and sharing knowledge with colleagues, identify and advocate for the most feasible and impactful solutions. So the role here really is around building the momentum and supporting decision makers to be able to make the changes that they commit to. So when we get down to humanitarian leaders and managers, again, the importance of communicating why this is important, why it's so urgent, and creating accountability in their organizations around, policies, procedures, sort of standards that they can set to hold staff more accountable for greener action. Also around building organizational capability, building partnerships and sharing knowledge. So this is with local and national actors, also with organizations typically outside of the humanitarian sphere. So those environmental organizations that we can really learn from. And then also around making shifts in behavior easy. So this comes back to creating those defaults or making things a lot easier for staff to make green choices and for programming to become more green. So trying to facilitate and make those processes easier to do. And then for donors, again, around communicating their commitment, holding humanitarian actors accountable for shifting to greener action, providing guidance to accompany donor requirements so it doesn't just become another tick box, supporting organizational capacity and initiatives to develop skills and knowledge, also to prioritize funding for green action and support stronger national enabling environments. So that's around supporting national governments to invest in sustainable infrastructure, or maybe to develop new policies, things like that. And I know these are framed at a really high level, but as soon as this report is out, we will make sure that this is shared with you. There is a lot more meaty information in there and more context that comes behind sort of the rationale behind these recommendations. Next slide, please. So how does this relate to cash? So obviously CVA can play a big role in greening humanitarian action, as Celine was mentioning just before. It has the power to significantly reduce emissions and cut down on waste. And waste is one of the biggest impacts in the Pacific, so it's a really key focus area more in CVA, and for a bit more exploration as far as how CVA programming fits into green response. And we also, of course, hope that insights from the behavioral study can help to inform future planning and advocacy around climate-sensitive CVA. Next slide, please. Yeah, so if you're interested to learn any more, please do check out the link to the framework, and do not hesitate to reach out to myself or my colleague Sam, who also works with me on this research. If you're interested to learn more about the framework, implement the framework, or to learn more about the behavioral stuff, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, thanks so much. Back to you, Michael.
Great. Thank you very much, Jessie. That was a very insightful presentation. I really appreciated the examples, especially from local actors in your presentations, and how that environmental concerns could be put into cash programming. So there are lots of things there in terms of actions, but hopefully something that we can further discuss in this community practice. Thank you very much for that, Jessie. So you can see the contact details of Jessie. Feel free to reach out to the Humanitarian Advisory Group. So let's move on to our next presentation. And feel free again to post your questions on either in the chat box or in the Q&A box, and we'll go to those later. So our next presenter is from the Joint Environment Unit of UNEP and OCHA. So we have Tina El-Khoury, who is the Nexus Environmental Assessment Tool, or the NEAT Plus project manager. She's based in Geneva, Switzerland. Tina is an environmental expert with experience in the intersection of humanitarian development and environmental consultancy fields. And her experience focuses primarily on sustainability of humanitarian organizations and how to make the shifts towards greener response on a strategic and operational level. So over to you, Tina.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. So yeah, I'm Tina from the UNEP OCHA Joint Environment Unit, and I'm going to be talking a bit about the resources and tools that we have to help practitioners to shift into a greener response. I was supposed to be with my colleague Diego Reyes, but he was not able to attend this presentation, so I'll be presenting on my own. Next slide, please. So a bit of background about the Joint Environment Unit. We were founded in 1994 and we're housed under the OCHA Response Support. So the JEU has two main work streams. The first one is the environmental emergencies. So we do coordination, mobilizations, and training. This is for the aim of doing rapid mobilization and deployment of environmental experts whenever there's an emergency or an environmental emergency. So this is done at no cost to affected countries, and we aim to deploy the environmental experts within 48 hours. So far we've done over 200 missions in 100 different countries. The other main work stream that we mainly work in, it's the Environment and Humanitarian Action, or the EHA. So in general, JEU promotes environmental issues as an integral part of all elements of humanitarian response, including across the humanitarian program cycle. So we have several guidelines you can refer to. We have several tools, which we'll be talking about in more details, but you can also refer to the website to get a more detailed idea about these tools and guidelines. So we'll move to the next slide, please. So yeah, when it comes to the environment and humanitarian action, specifically for CASH, we offer several resources and tools. So starting with the resources, there's a CASH team page, if you want, at the EHA Connect website. So this page, if you refer to it, there's a list of general recommendation and guidelines on how to integrate environmental considerations to improve the environmental impact within the CASH interventions. In addition to relevant reports and studies also available on the website, which you can refer to for more information. The second part of the resources is the trainings. So mainly we recommend 3 trainings to set the base for any practitioner on environmental considerations. So these are general trainings about greening the response, not just for CASH, but they are very important to set the base. So these trainings are the environment and humanitarian action, the climate change considerations for emergency services, and the beyond response. And finally, within the resources, we have the Environment and Humanitarian Action Network. So this is a network where members jointly work to advance humanitarian policy, strengthen knowledge on EHA, and conduct advocacy to strengthen coordination. So when it comes to CASH, it is very important to strengthen coordination between the humanitarian sectors. So between the CVA community and such network, if there is a coordination, if there is better ways for communication, this would definitely facilitate the knowledge and experience sharing. So this is for the resources. As for the tools, we will be focusing on 2 tools that are provided under the JEU, which are the Nexus Environmental Assessment Tool, or the NEED+, and the Virtual Environmental and Humanitarian Advisor, or the VEHA tool. Next slide, please. So starting with the NEED+, it's a rapid and simple environmental screening tool that aims to help practitioners identify the environmental risks within their operational context and by sector. So this is done through a list of multiple choice questions. And the tools offers coverage in 2 contexts, the rural and the urban. So the rural NEED+, it's available on Kobo, and you get the results through Excel, or you can directly use Excel to fill out the questionnaire and get the results. And it's currently available in English, French, and Spanish. So the tool includes an environmental sensitivity module, which helps you assess the sensitivity of the area where the project will be conducted. And then you can choose the optional modules, either shelter, wash, or food security, depending on the type of project, or you can stick only to the environmental sensitivity and get an idea about the sensitivity of the project area. The other version of the tool is the Urban NEED+. So this one is only available online, or it's cloud-based. It's currently only available in English, and it includes the same modules in addition to a livelihood module. So the NEED+ is increasingly being used by humanitarian practitioners, and it helps to identify ways to reduce risk related to their projects. So when it comes to CASH, it does not clearly address the question of which operational method to use, CVA versus in-kind, and it does not identify environmental safeguard for CVA. But it is, however, an important tool to assess the environmental sensitivity and highlight the main environmental impacts predicted. And it can also help you in the design of your project or initiative by offering mitigation measures to limit the negative impacts. Moving on to the next slide, it's the VEHA tool. So the VEHA, or the Virtual Environmental and Humanitarian Advisor, it is a tool that has been designed as an online resource for practitioners and professionals working in the response, planning, and management teams. It's a very user-friendly tool. So to use the VEHA, you just have to go to the website, you choose the sector, the subsector, activity, and subactivity. So you can see on the screen, there's an example where the subactivity is the CVA. So this is one of the cash-related sub-activities that's included in the tool. So the tool will then generate a guidance list that includes an overview of the environmental factors, environmental impacts. It will create a list of suggestions for environmental activities, and will also provide some lessons learned from previous experiences when it comes to this specific sub-activity, and will suggest environmental indicators for monitoring. So this is just one example where cash is available in the tool. There's also other sub-activities related to market support, in-kind distribution for food, cash for work. So it depends on the type of project that you are conducting. So these are the tools that we have. Next slide. These are my contact info, me and Diego. If you have any questions, please do let us know. And thank you so much.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much, Tina, for the presentation. Well, I'll be very honest here. I think this is the first time for me to hear about those tools, and actually good to see that these tools are readily available for us humanitarian practitioners to use. And do check out all the links to those tools that Tina mentioned. They're all posted in the chat box, so do check them out after the webinar. Great. We will move to our next presenter. Just checking if Camille is already online. Yeah, but maybe not a few of those slides. Singing. How do we proceed?
Oh, I'm so sorry. We're waiting for Camille to be able to join. Maybe I will answer one of the questions that is directly to the community of practice and CALP team, as we received that in the Q&A, and I was typing it, so it's easier for me to answer. So no, the community of practice up to now doesn't have a strategic document or anything done together. It's just a part of the CALP website up to now. So please, once again, if you are interested in having fewer dedicated mandate or anything, put that in the survey so we will know about that. Same for the relative topic related to CVA. So I have a question in three parts. So will we have topics related to CVA used as a tool for climate change adaptation? It's not something that CALP will develop, but if they are a very enthusiastic part and a part of the priority, we can think about supporting some working group around that. And of course, link with the person that are developing it. And are we planning a guidance document, not only to mitigate the environmental impact of CVA, but also to design a climate adaptative program? So once again, the mitigation, the greening is just one part that we decide to deep dive on it for this webinar specifically, because we see that is part of what we were thinking according to the state of the world cash, but it will not be the only webinar. So next one should be more focused on the response. So we invite you during March, second half of March, I think, to discuss a bit more about anticipatory action as part of the response. We will also discuss, probably according to the surveys that we have up to now, a bit about social protection and shock responsive adaptation and the link to climate. So it's a building block. Once again, I will put in the chat the link to the survey, so please answer it. And also a question for Tina about the VIA tool. So maybe we can answer it very quickly, Tina. As the VIA tool is sector-based, is there an option to use it for multi-purpose cash assistance program, or plan to develop one for that?
Yes, hi. Thank you for your question. I For now, it's not a specific option, but the good thing about the tool that even if you go into the general cash or CVA part of the tool, it will show relevant guidelines and relevant recommendations. So some of the recommendations might still be applicable, but there isn't one specifically now for MPCA program.
And
I think it's something else.
Thank you. Michael, I suggest that we proceed. So if you can just introduce the next slide, and I will begin if it's not coming.
Yeah.
I hope.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much, Celine. So this slide, we are supposed to have Camille, but hopefully he will be able to join us later on. So yeah, we'll just proceed with the presentation from Action Against Hunger by Celine. Next slide, please.
Maybe just introduce Camille when he will be there. He should be, so everyone will know him. So sorry for that. The Action Against Hunger funds have shared with us a survey that has been published last week, I think. And they try to calculate the greenhouse gas footprint of the MEBs of 20 of the countries that they are following at the moment. And they are focusing on the food part of the MEB because it's the only part that is there for every single MEB. So why is this study and methodology the main finding, and the next step it's what's supposed to be presented to you at the moment. So maybe next slide, please. We can move along. So why is this study? Next slide. Sorry. It's definitely something that it's done at the moment, and I'm sorry that Camino's here because it's something done by a lot of different organizations. It's part of a network who try to manage and know about their greenhouse gas accounting, so to know the global impact of the organization, and they are trying to know that. So how does they do that? They basically multiply the activity data with the emission factor to calculate the equivalent volume of CO2. And they are doing that for each type of activity, etc. As you can see that number of liter of fuel, laptop, all the procurements, everything that they're building, etc. They are based on that. It's really key to notice that. Sorry, next slide. That you can either reduce the activity. So sorry, yeah, you can reduce the quantity based on what you do on the activity, or trying to, of course, trying to reduce linking with the emission factor. So for the example of fuel is quite easy. You can do eco driving. You can try to diminish the consumption of your car. You can have hybrid car, you can do carpooling, etc. For your fuel part, can you click again? I think it's animated slide.
Celine, sorry to interrupt. I think
Camille is there. Great. Yeah. So I stop here. Sorry. And Camille, if you can run through your first slide very quickly.
Yeah, so just maybe to quickly introduce Camille. So Camille is the head of the Environment and Climate Department of Action Against Hunger, France. So the department he's leading on coordinates the consideration of environment and climate issues and centralizes cross-functional expertise, in particular counting the greenhouse emission, sustainable purchasing, and waste management. So that it's part of Camille's task. So and Camille will continue the presentation on the study that they recently completed. Over there, Camille.
Thank you. Do you hear me correctly?
Yes, perfectly.
Yes.
Please go
okay. And also something to add is I have two daughters that are quite hard to wake up in the morning and put the cats. So that's why I'm late. I'm sorry. So yes, the goal of the GHG accounting is so to multiply. I think it's where you were. To multiply one activity data by an emission factor. And so I can act, if I want to reduce these CO2 emissions, I can act to reduce the activity data. So for a CVA, so it's just the amount of cash we transfer, or the emission factor. So here, in this example, I can change the type of fuel to put renewable energy inside the engine. And so if I do both actions, of course, we have a very reduced CO2 emission at the end. If you want to go with the next slide, because for the cash transfers, it's quite complicated because as everybody understands, we don't have a lot of solutions to reduce the emission factor because we are not the master of the expense. It's the beneficiaries of the money transfer that decides what they buy with this cash transferred. And so if we cannot touch the emission factor, so the only mathematical solution is to reduce the quantity of cash transferred. And that is exactly what we don't want, because we think that the quantity of cash transfer will increase with the time proportionally to humanitarian needs. So for us, the only solution is to focus on the emission factor and identify the different levels to reduce this emission factor and don't take it as it is as a non-modifiable data. Next slide, please. Okay. So the methodology we use to calculate the carbon footprint of minimum expenditure basket is as following. Action Against Hunger France is made of 23 countries of operation. So we were mainly focused, of course, on country of operation of ACF. On these 23 countries, we did collect 20 different minimum baskets, but only 16 of them was showing complete enough data to enter into the study. So finally, only 16 countries are studied. For each MEB, there is a different components, so food items, non-food items, etc., etc. And even for each item, rice, beans, meat, etc., etc., the goal was to find, to identify an emission factor. So the methodology was the following. Is there an emission factor available from suppliers, for example, because generally it's the most precise, depending on the supplier calculation methodology, but generally is correct. So, so if there is an emission factor coming from supplier, it's verified by the CITEPA and validated or not. Secondly, is it an emission factor available in a recognized database? So the most recognized one, like Bas Carbon or EcoEvent, etc., etc. If no, is there already a study to calculate this emission factor? And if not, is it possible to calculate by on our own a simplified emission factor? For example, for a plastic bucket, we can consider that this bucket is made of plastic at 95%. And so we assimilate the emission factor of the bucket to the emission factor of the plastic. Okay. Next slide, please. So you see here, one weakness of our study, of course, is we did use the same emission factor for all rice, whatever the country. We use the same emission factor for all sheep or meat or fish for all country. Okay, it's not a specific emission factor by country. It's a weakness, of course, of the study. We knew it even before to start the study, but it's preferable to go in that way, and thereafter, in a second step, to study the different variation between the country production methodologies. So once we did identify the the different emission factors at step 2, we create a kind of pivot table to mix the emission factors and the data entry. And in step 4, we perform the carbon accounting of all MEBs. And finally, we did focus on food items. Why? Because of the next slide about the main findings. So, yes, if you want to, voila, exactly. So the first step of the study, after designing the emission factor, etc., was to calculate the, let's say, the overall carbon accounting of the different MEBs. Okay, so for the 16 countries we did study, this is the carbon emissions, we can say, of the different MEBs depending on their composition. So we can see 2 or 3 things here. The first one is the composition of the MEB are very different from one country to another. Okay, this is because of the way the MEB is designed. And so if, for example, in Iraq, the MEB is designed to complete basic needs of a household in refugees camps, and this household miss money to buy energy, so it will so the MEB will onboard some energy expenses. But in other countries, maybe the energy expenses are already covered by the household, and so that don't mean that people in Zimbabwe are not electrified. That means that maybe their expense related to energy are already covered. So the energy component is not in the MEB. Okay, but there is a big difference between what is the real consumption of people on site and what is present in the MEB. Because what is present in the MEB is only what people are not able to procure by themselves. Okay, but things available on the local market. Second point is only stuff available on the local market can be present in the MEB. So maybe there is a need of cereal in the MEB, but there is no cereal in the local market. So we cannot include the cereal in the MEB. And so the first thing we observe is a very important variation in the MEB quantities. Okay, so for example, in Bangladesh, the MEB is very, very high compared to other countries like Afghanistan or Zimbabwe or Yemen. So there is very important variation in terms of quantity and also in terms of composition. For example, you can see in Myanmar that almost half of the MEB is done by equipment items. Okay, so first thing is the MEBs are not, it's not possible to compare the MEBs between themselves. Okay, because there is too much variation in terms of composition and size of the basket. Next slide, please. So finally, we decide to focus only on food items because all MEBs contain food items. Okay, so what we see in the carbon footprint of food items only on MEBs, the first thing we observe is there is MEB with meat and fish, and there is MEB without meat and fish. And so for the MEBs who onboard meat and fish, we see that each time this meat and fish can double, even triple sometimes the carbon weight of minimum expenditure basket. That's the case for the Bangladesh, for the Chad, for the Cameroon, for Madagascar, etc., etc. Okay, so there is a very huge difference in carbon emissions if we consider that the MEB contain meat and fish or not. For action against hunger France, the fact to count meat and fish or not in the MEB create a variation of our carbon footprint over 20,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. So it's quite important question to know if people buy meat or not with the cash we distribute. And the question is real because we know that the meat is very expensive. That's why we say in our report. And so if the meat is particularly expensive regarding the weight of product we buy, it can be 3 to 5 times more expensive than rice for the same weight of food. And so we can say that, or we can do the hypothesis that if we don't distribute 100% of the basket amount, we can consider that people will prioritize the expense, and they will prioritize with selecting items that cost the less. And so not meat and not fish. Okay, and if we do that hypothesis, that means we remove, in a way, like 20,000 tons of CO2 of the Action Against Hunger France carbon accounting. Okay, and I don't know if you know the price of the tons of carbon of offsetting right now. Just if you know this, you can put it in the chat just to calculate how much it could cost to Action Against Hunger France if we want just to offset just the meat of, of the MEBs. Next slide, please. Okay, finally, the goal was to estimate what was the carbon footprint of the cash transfers for Action Against Hunger France in this country. And so here is what we call the carbon intensity of an activity. That means each time I give or each time we transfer $1 into a program, this dollar will be so expense to buy some food items in that case. And so here is the carbon emissions of $1 in the different countries. And this USD in blue color is if we consider that that beneficiaries buy all food items in the basket. In green is we consider that the beneficiaries buy everything in the basket except meat and fish. And in orange, it's a total other methodology, because for now, without any data, the only methodology we have in carbon accounting to calculate the emission of the cash is to use the carbon intensity of the GDP. Okay, so we take the national carbon footprint of a country, all these emissions, national ones. We take on another side the GDP, and so we calculate a ratio of CO2 emission per unit of GDP. And so it is a kind of carbon intensity of the country where we were. But it's definitely not ideal. And so it was interesting to compare the two methodologies, blue and green, our methodology with the carbon intensity of MEB, and in orange, the carbon intensity of the local GDP. And we see that the methodology using MEBs, even if it's not ideal, and even if there is some remaining weaknesses of the methodology, of course, it is very more precise than using the carbon intensity of the GDP. Next slide, please. And I think it will be, no, sorry, there is the last slide, because of course, to estimate the carbon emission of cash activities is good, but to identify the levers to reduce it is clearly better, and it's our final goal. So in the second side of the study, for each food item present in baskets, we ask the CITEPA to identify all the emissions factors of other food items that can be substituted into the same food item categories. Okay, so for example, here is vegetal oil, and inside a MEB, when we look at the composition of a minimum expenditure basket, sometimes it's just marked, or more often, it's just written oil or vegetal oil. And after, it's our own choice, action against hunger, to say, okay, for this study, the vegetal oil people find locally will be palm oil or peanut oil, etc., etc. Okay, so for our study, we do decide that it was mainly palm oil that was available on local market, and we decided to choose these emission factors. And it is the same, and more often we have done an average calculation. For example, most of the time for meat, it was written meat without any precision. And so we decide to create an emission factor with a mix of chicken, sheep, and a little of beef. Okay. But what we see is clearly for the same category of items, the different items can have very various emissions going from 1 to 3 in their emission factor. So that don't mean that in minimum expenditure basket, we will modify the composition to decarbonize this basket. The MEBs, it is just a theoretical tool to calculate the amount of money to transfer. It's not a tool to decide what people buy or not with the cash we transferred. And so what we said in the study is to modify the virtual composition of the MEB is totally useless because people do not choose their expense regarding that. But what we can do is to try to influence the local market, and especially the availability on the local market of certain food items, especially to reduce the ones we already identified that are highly emissive. Next slide, please. And I think it will be the conclusion. Exactly. So finally, we have done this study and applied the result to the Action Against Hunger France carbon footprint. The overall result is CVA, because especially the cash transfer seems to represent 30%, so 1/3 of the overall emission of Action Against Hunger France. So it's a very important activity and carbon intensive activity. And it is that important that if we admit that it's not possible to reduce these emissions, the effort to be done to other activity to reduce Action Against Hunger emissions by 2 before 2030. If we don't reduce the carbon emissions of the CVA, that will report the effort of reduction on other activity, and these activities are not able to reduce that much. Okay, so if we don't succeed to reduce the CVA emissions, we will have a very important problem to achieve our goal to divide by 2 our carbon emissions. Of course, there is some weakness in this study. It's not a surprise. It was known even before to start the study, but it was a first approach. And so it is clearly necessary to continue that work. We don't think useful to calculate carbon footprint of MEBs for more countries than the 16 we already calculate. we don't think useful because, as we said, the methodology is quite weak because based on the minimum expenditure basket, that is a theoretical tool. So if we think useful to continue this study, it will be more to use the calculation matrix we have done for this study, but instead of using MEB data, using data from survey of what people really buy with the cash distributed. So that's the first point. And secondly, regarding emission factors, we think it could be useful to get emissions factor from local food or local produced food. Because we think that using emission factor from Occidental meat, it's not exactly the same than the emission factor of beef or pork finding something to eat into the wild. And so we think necessary to identify and calculate emission factor that match with local produced food. Finally, the carbon intensity of the MEB is a very good step to estimate the global footprint of cash activities, but the footprint of what people buy with the cash is only one side, maybe the most important, but one side of the carbon emissions of a CVA program. Because after that, we need to add all the carbon footprint of IT devices used for the survey, for the money transfer, etc. We need to add all the kilometers done by program teams to perform the surveys, do the quality control, etc., etc. So if we take the MEB contents, let's say, and we add the functional emissions, that will help to estimate the overall emissions of program using cash transfers. Thank you for your attention.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much, Camille, for that very interesting, at least to me, presentation. I think, as is mentioned by our participants, it's actually fascinating to see that we are really looking into these examples now. And I do hope, Camille, that with this study, which can be found already on ACF website's page, we can elicit more debates and discussion and deep dive into these discussions further, especially in our community of practice. So thank you very much. And hopefully this will also inspire similar studies in the future. Definitely a much needed evidence in this space. Great.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much, Camille. Yeah. And then I'm just super conscious about our time. We are left only a very few minutes. Let's move on to our panelists to some of our to hear the perspective on the presentation so far. I will quickly introduce Clara Sachawan. So Clara has been working on CVA files since 2013 and has been deployed in operational and advocacy roles in many small to large-scale operations within the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. Her current role focuses on the transversal use of CVA, very challenging, for other multidisciplinary and sectoral objectives, while contributing where she can in the evolution of CVA and its reformation in the humanitarian sector. So given that you have into this, Clara, maybe I'll direct you the first question that we have prepared. And the question is, as highlighted in the presentations, there are like a broad range of approaches and considerations when it comes to greening humanitarian assistance. So with regards to greening humanitarian cash, and the role of cash might play in enabling greener responses, do you think that there are elements or approaches where people or us should focus our energies that could have the greater impact?
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for the question, Michael. Yeah, and also thank you, colleagues, for the presentations. Certainly, these findings have sparked a lot of internal discussions here within ICRC, as we do have also the same commitment to try to reduce our, carbon emissions by half. But again, a lot of conversations sparked around whether this method is suitable for us, whether this reflects well what we're trying to measure, all of these things. Either way, we applaud ACF for undertaking the study. I think it's certainly grounded in logic. But, as mentioned, there are certain limitations around its focus on food items, which also makes sense given ACF's mandate. So when we were discussing this, when considering adopting this measurement, we were just trying to also understand whether or not this makes sense for ICRC, and given that we don't have these limitations necessarily in food security mandate, and again, what was mentioned before, knowing that people are also spending cash beyond just food, certainly, we're debating around the different methods of measurement. Again, ACF's, the GDP, using the GDP measurement that Kemi also mentioned, and it's sparking a lot of conversation. Let me put it that way. Because certainly measuring carbon footprint of cash is certainly a complex one. So we went down many rabbit holes, but maybe what was one of the key moments in the conversation that we found helpful in the end was, really to answer, why are we doing this? Is it to determine, the emissions so that we're able to report accurately? Is it to influence whether we do more or less cash? Or is it to reduce emissions of cash activities overall? Again, knowing that one of the biggest benefits of cash really is to provide the affected people the flexibility and choice. So we use this as kind of the focus of our conversations. And as we discussed this, we came to an agreement that as we attempt to green humanitarian action, we will not do it at the compromise of that flexibility and choice. And I think that's also the common kind of conclusion other colleagues mentioned as well, because we don't want to influence necessarily how people are using the cash, especially during times of emergencies where, again, most people are really just trying to survive. Because really, when we think about it, cash does work on the basis of whatever already exists in a given place and time. And this is both in terms of behavioral practices, meaning what they eat, farming practices, fuel choice, all of these things, and also what is already available in the local market, whether that's local products or imported products. So for me, the way I look at it, cash didn't cause those choices, or cash didn't result in those products being in the market. Cash actually just enables the people to access it. So really, when we discussed this, instead we found the entry points that we are looking to explore may not be necessarily cash itself, but maybe part of the equation, but really to find entry points more either in market-based programming or value chain development, and potentially targeting strategic commodities and services. And this is a lot of the learnings that came out of the study, for example, that helps identify or maybe, focus on key, whether that's the cereals, whether that's the meat or whatever, on selecting those strategic commodities. Again, advocacy can always be complemented with cash around greener practices. And this is something we discussed as well. However, we are trying to say that, for this, I think it's best to be explored during peacetime. Again, a little bit of again, because during emergency and crises, we do find that most people are really trying to survive. And for us to try to influence during that time isn't the most effective. But certainly during peacetime, and again, during preparedness, all of these things are entry points, let's say, to try to influence that. Maybe I'll leave it at that. And I don't know, I'd be curious to kind of throw that back to other organizations as well in terms of what their conversation's been like within their own institution, and also just for their own reflections. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And indeed, yeah, we need to have those reflections from within organizations. Yeah, it will be interesting to see how other organizations have taken the challenges, I guess, that this study has showed to us. But yeah, indeed, that's a reflection in terms of how do you move forward with this, and then also recognizing the choice and flexibility that cash offers, especially to the target to the recipients of our assistance. Good. Yeah, I think my next question will be for Chessie and then Tina on things that you have presented. Is there anything else you would like to share regarding how people engage in providing cash assistance can use the tools now available, the framework that you have mentioned, Jesse, and the tools that you've shared, Tina, to integrate environmental considerations into their work and advocate for climate-sensitive cash and voucher assistance? So maybe to Jesse first, and then Tina.
Thanks, Michael. So as I mentioned before, our framework isn't specifically for cash programming, but I think there are a lot of parts of it that are applicable, especially at a wider level, especially like Claire was just speaking about, the importance, I think, of working with local actors in local markets and figuring out sort of what's already available and what vendors can provide green options, making sure communities know what the green options are, making sure they know why it's important. There's a lot in our framework as well around greening operations more broadly. So organizational operations, cutting emissions, rethinking sort of office supplies and utilities and things like that. So there's a lot of detail in there around things like that as well. Also, some of the insights from the behavioral study as well can be really helpful for advocacy and for sort of shifting the dial in your own organizations and trying to get people to think more greenly and change practices that way as well. So we hope that can be really broadly applicable across actors who are working in cash as well and across the whole humanitarian sector. So I'll leave it at that, and over to you, Tina.
Thank you, Jess. Yes, definitely. I agree with what you said. And here it's very important to consider the environmental lens throughout the process. So to start from the beginning and look at the whole process with an environmental lens and make sure we can see where we can do the improvement throughout the whole process. So it's not just about cash versus CVA, it's about, like Clara was saying, it's about the whole market analysis to start from the beginning to see where improvements can be done and where greening can be implemented. And here also I'd like to highlight the importance of education and awareness. And that's not just for the humanitarian practitioners, it's also for the beneficiaries. So if they are getting the cash, or if they're getting specific items that's maybe more sustainable, or there's a change in what they're getting, maybe to talk to them, to make them aware why this is important, why these changes are being made. So the education and awareness, not just at the practitioners level, but also for the beneficiaries who are the ones implementing, who are the ones affected by these changes. So education, especially when it comes to cash modality, because a lot of practitioners consider that to be itself going green. So switching from in-kind to cash, for them, that's more sustainable. But then again, they're not looking at the whole process from environmental lens. They're just focusing on their part as practitioners. They're not looking at what's happening after that. So definitely, for me, I think education and the creation of this type of network, like the CULT network, these kind of events are crucial for sharing experiences and talking more about the positive things that are coming out from each organization. And we can then learn from each other, not just create the same errors and repeat the same problems. So that way we can learn from each other as well.
Great, thank you very much for that, Jesse and Tina. Yeah, unfortunately, we only have very few minutes left in this call, but maybe just to a final question to everyone. So as a wrap up, what do you think will be your advocacy? What do you think? What is something that we need to advocate to the humanitarian community for us to move forward agenda on greening the humanitarian response? So what could be that piece of advocacy that we could all focus our energy so that we could better influence the whole humanitarian system? So maybe I'll give the floor to Camille, and then Jesse, Tina, and then Clara.
Yes. Thank you for the question. So even before to advocate, the first point should be to be convinced as a sector, CVA, that your carbon footprint is particularly intensive. So and it's not win already, because with discussing with some stakeholders of the CVA, it seems that some stakeholders think there is no carbon footprint with the cash because it's only IT transfers, etc., etc. So there is a kind of internal education job to be done to better understand, and so understand also the levers to reduce. That could be a first thing. Second thing is it will be difficult, but I think one of the only action possible to do as a sector is yes, to advocate and to change the practices and try to influence the products that are accessible locally on the market. Because finally, when we distribute cash, people buy what they find on the local market. And so it's something that is very difficult for the humanitarian aid to understand that at one point it will be necessary to influence the local market. You know, for the logistics teams of humanitarian sectors, it's a kind of religion to not touch, to not influence the local market, or if there is a risk to influence the local market, really to preserve the balance and the concurrence in between the different actors, etc., etc. And us, with this study, we said the only way to reduce the carbon footprint is to influence, favorize some suppliers, favorize some kinds of food, etc., etc. And so there is a big advocacy to make especially the donors understand that yes, it will be possible and justified to influence the local market and its stakeholders, and it can be even a role, an efficient role we have to play. And so it's a kind of mindset change, and that will request a lot of advocacy, in my opinion.
Thanks. Jesse.
I don't know if there's much I can add on to that. I know we're just about out of time. But yeah, I would just say, to echo what Camille is saying, it's around really shifting mindsets around that it is possible to calculate these types of things. And it's something that's really urgent and important, and something that I think the way that advocacy can be the most impactful is really around, trying to reduce those barriers around thinking it's too difficult, it's too costly, it's too timely. So the things where people sort of put it in a basket and say, oh, we can't do that, it's too hard. So it's trying to reduce some of those barriers and show people examples of positive changes, and show people examples of how things are already shifting and how things are already moving, and try to really reframe the problem around making it more positive, and how humanitarian action can actually also have a positive benefit on the environment, and how we can sort of reshape the way that we think and the way that we do things. So it's not necessarily how can we, mitigate the negative impacts, but also thinking around how can we actually try to benefit positively in some of these contexts where we work. So that's, I think, what I would hark on as far as the advocacy side of things. I'll hand it back over to you, Michael.
Okay. Over to you, Tina, for your insights.
Thank you. Of course, I agree with everything that has been said. I just want to add here that practitioners don't have to be environmental experts. Like, now there's enough guidelines, there's enough tools to help them. So just a bit of education, a bit of awareness, and then there's so much that's already there that can help them do this transition. So it's just about a bit of education, a bit of awareness, and then it's very easy to do that. And even when it comes to funding, it's something that being pushed by donors. So from all aspects, it's now very easy to do this shift. It's just about getting the courage to do that. That's all I want to say. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Tina. And lastly, but at least, Clara.
Thanks. So yes, in principle, in agreement with what everyone is already saying. So I'll echo that in terms of trying to reduce and having more greener humanitarian action within our sector overall. Maybe I'll make a plea in terms of from the practitioner side here, and that, again, a reminder that, cash is one of the biggest benefits of cash is around that flexibility and choice. And again, enabling the population to access what's already existing. I do want to challenge a little bit in that we don't try to put the onus on reducing the greenhouse gas emissions to the people, because again, we're not trying to influence what they're purchasing, but really that we look internally ourselves in terms of our own practices, you know, as an organization, and how we can try to reduce the greenhouse gases emissions that way as well. Yeah, just something to balance, of course, because we don't want to take away that benefit of cash that we've worked so hard also to advocate for. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone, Clara, Jessie, Tina, and Camille, for the brilliant discussion so far. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but thanks everyone as well for participating, for giving extra few minutes of your time. But as mentioned, and this is the first this year for the community of practice, we do encourage everyone to join us and share your thoughts and your contribution, especially with your organizations. This community of practice is hopefully will thrive and will have more exchanges in the next coming months. So yeah, thank you very for that. Thank you very much for that. For those asking maybe, so our presentations and recording of this webinar will be shared in our COP website. So do regularly visit our website for those materials. And yeah, if you are happy to receive and be part of our email list, there is an emailing list for the community of practice. So do get in touch with Celine and Ruth if you wanted to receive those updates. Yeah, and Celine, anything more?
Yes, and please, thank you for this amazing discussion today and all the panelists for being there. But please fill the survey so we will know what you are waiting for, if you know more on tools, because it seems that something that was a real pleasure to have today, so we can plan something on that. If you have other priority, please let us know. So go on the form, go on the survey and let us know. If you want to be part of a group, also to be more active, discuss various things, please let us know. It's super important. So if you can take 5 minutes of your time, more than the 5 that we are stolen from you because we are too late. Thank you for all that. And
Great.
see you in March for the next webinar series of the COP. Bye-bye.
Great. Thanks everyone. Bye for now.
Thank you.